good Rubik's Cube.
Are we live?
We're live.
Oh, sorry guys, we're getting very distracted by Arpan. Arpan's doing another another test streaming day here, so if you want to check out Reddit's live streaming stuff, r/pan.
There are a lot of cats.
Cameron and I have talked about it. Prairie Dog TV ended though, and that was the best part.
It was pretty good.
We'll have to follow up on that later. Let's get rid of that. It was very distracting. Very distracting. Anyway, welcome to Live at Epiphan, your weekly show talking about all kinds of streaming things. This is episode 135, and I have a book worth of notes here.
I mean, we both do, really, but...
Today, we are talking about how to live stream on YouTube. We are going to focus primarily on using a hardware encoder.
Yep.
We're going to touch on some of the other things as well. Some of our viewers commented that they wanted to kind of cover some fundamentals about live streaming. And so this is probably the first in what will eventually be a couple of parts talking about the fundamentals. And we decided instead of trying to do one very long episode, we would break it up by platform a little bit. So today we're doing YouTube. We don't have a specific schedule on when we'll do things like Facebook and others, but that's kind of what we're planning on doing. I'm watching chat. You're going to be our guide through UIs. So,
who do we have today? Let's do some roll calling.
Tim Trott said earlier, he said hi. I said hi, Tim, in the chat there. Danny Grizzle's in the chat there as well. And D. Scott is also in there. Saying, wouldn't the process for YouTube be the same as for Facebook? More or less, yes. There are some differences, but generally speaking, especially when you're talking about hardware encoders, the process for any platform is virtually the same. Linda's in there saying, earlier she had put in a question that we'll probably touch on in a little bit. So anyway, Andrew Patton saying hi from Australia. Kim giving us the thumbs up. Rosenbauer America saying hello. So hi to everyone in chat. We're not going to address any of your questions until later on. We want to get through a lot of this, but please throw them into chat as you think of them, and we will get down to them. So
why don't we start with
the news?
Something a little light, a little fun.
But first, the news.
The news.
Both of these news items are ones I put in, so I don't know if you want to cover them or not.
I mean, they're good news items.
They are. The first one, my family's personal sport is politics. So this week was kind of a big one here in Canada with the federal election on Monday. Some of us were up till very late in the evening watching the results come in. But one of the things that I found very interesting was that, and a couple weeks ago we talked about in the news how some Twitch users had gotten bans and DMCA takedowns for using clips of Democratic debates in the US, and I kind of ranted a bit on how I thought that was crazy. On Monday night, there were several Twitch streamers, not even Canadian Twitch streamers, who were live streaming the Canadian election results coming in and straight up playing the CBC News broadcast from YouTube on their stream and doing commentary with it.
But from what I understand, no volume from those at all.
Not the one I looked at, but nothing happened. Everything was fine. No one got a takedown. And I actually considered doing the same thing myself, but I decided that doing it alone would have been a little weird since I didn't have a commentary partner, so I didn't. Anyway.
And I would have joined you, but sleep.
Yeah, exactly. The other piece, speaking of Twitch,
actually, yes, this is a big one.
This was announced actually just today and a few hours ago. And I kind of put this on my note, is this the decline of Twitch? Wanted to go for that clickbait title, the death of Twitch. But essentially, one of the largest video game streamers in the world, Shroud, good Canadian boy, by the way, announced today that he is moving from Twitch, where he is currently the largest person on Twitch after Ninja left.
Yep.
He is now following Ninja and moving to Mixer. Mixer being Microsoft's version of a Twitch-like live platform. I think the intriguing thing here is that Mixer has about 1-2% of the live streaming kind of share of the pie.
For now.
We shared one of that pie a couple weeks ago. This is interesting, and I don't know whether it's an indicator that people are getting sick of Twitch and moving, or whether Microsoft, who owns Mixer, is just putting huge dollars up to attract some of these big content creators.
I'm willing to wager probably a little bit of both, based off some of the Twitch politics, so to speak, that we've seen over the last little while.
Exactly. So I just found it interesting because this is a guy who makes millions a year streaming. So there would have had to been some pretty good number of zeros behind a dollar sign in there somewhere for him to make that move very suddenly.
But
so
I've got to say that's definitely must have been a very good move on Microsoft's part, because even just tuning in before Shroud starts
he
streaming.
plans to go live in 6 hours, and he has a countdown timer, and there's almost 20,000 people watching the countdown timer, countdown from 6 hours. So anyway, craziness. But that's the news. Just kind of throwing it out there. If anyone wants to experiment with streaming to Mixer, maybe that's a platform we're going to have to put into this series of fundamentals. Good news is it's essentially the exact same as what we're going to talk about today. I am going to talk about here a little bit in terms, I did mention someone here was just mentioning they have a webcaster that's not working anymore. This chat for this show is not the appropriate place to discuss that, so please reach out to our support team through live chat on our website or email us at info@epiphan.com, and our support team can help you with that. Just include details like the serial number of the device and so on. So
on a streaming front,
let's jump in.
Why don't we talk about how many YouTube users there are in the world?
More than I can count.
Probably, well, YouTube, according to YouTube, is claiming that they have about
billions.
A little bit over, probably a little bit over a billion users, which is about, what, a third of the live presence?
Yeah, for live, it's very significant. It's billion. Yeah. Obviously, VOD on YouTube's even larger, but even live on YouTube is no small piece. It's significant. Yeah, YouTube says it's over 1 billion users. That's a lot. So the potential for your live audience is pretty big.
It is pretty big. I mean, 1 billion minus 1, because you're the one person streaming.
Yes. I watch myself all the time.
Yeah, but that's because you're a narcissist.
Yeah, no, but it is potentially a very large customer base, if you will. They are customers, consumers of your content. So YouTube can be a great place in order to start off, learn, figure out what you want to do. There's lots of reasons why you might do it. There's also lots of ways to do it. And so we're going to touch on a couple of those again. Today's focus is with a hardware encoder, but what are some of the other ways we can do it?
A great way to start, especially if you're kind of like an average consumer or maybe a social media type individual, I'd probably say the average is going to be either a mobile-based device like your cell phone, or you might be doing it from a web browser.
Right.
Whether it's a webcam, just using the web-based application through Google Chrome, and then also we're looking at other avenues like software encoders, which are very popular amongst Twitch streamers and gamers.
And then of course hardware encoders. So one of the notes, and this came up in a question earlier that Linda asked about, she was asking about, is there any way to live stream on YouTube now with considering that they have this new limitation for 1,000 subs? That 1,000 subscriber limitation only applies to using your mobile device. If you're using a smartphone and the YouTube app, you must have 1,000 subscribers to your channel, or you cannot live stream from your mobile device any longer.
This does not apply to software
Anything
encoding,
else.
hardware encoders, or even a web browser.
You can use your web browser with a webcam on any computer. You can use a software encoding piece like OBS, Wirecast, etc., or you can use a hardware encoder like our Webcaster X2 or the Pearl family of stuff. So basically, any other method of live streaming to YouTube works without limitation.
Now, which method you choose to use really depends on how you want your viewers to consume that content, how mobile you need to be, how updated and professional you want that look to be.
Even the type of content.
That's very true.
Yeah, there's a lot of things, and obviously whether you're a professional or an amateur or having fun with it or doing it as a business, there's lots of reasons why you might choose different ways. You mentioned starting out, you might just use a webcam and the browser.
I mean, I know a lot of professional streamers that still use something similar to just even software encoding, and it's either like, a USB-based camera or even just a USB microphone. And they're doing phenomenal for themselves.
Yeah, you definitely can. And I think they're mentioning one of the things we can mention as a webcam in a browser, that can even be a capture card like our AVIO series of cards, so that you can bring in a professional camera signal and make it behave as a webcam and just use it in the browser that way, or in software like OBS.
Absolutely.
So again, what works for you, it's going to vary by person, what you have on hand, what equipment you might have. One of the reasons, obviously, besides the fact that we make and sell them, one of the reasons we focus on hardware encoders is that we truly believe that it is one of the most reliable ways, and when you add it all up, oftentimes can be one of the less expensive ways of live streaming on YouTube. So there's big advantages, and we had a whole list here, and I'm going to refer to my notes here because it was a big long list. So what are some of the advantages of using a hardware encoder versus some of these software options?
Well, we can talk about, first of all, with software, you've got your operating system to consider. So if you've got Windows updates or updates to your OS X, or if you're using Linux, which there are a lot of limitations for software applications you can use on specific operating systems. That's one thing to consider. The physical hardware of that computer that you're using is another big one. Let's see, the equipment that you want to use with it. You know, if you're limited to a webcam, whether you're using or a professional based camera or more prosumer based camera with a USB capture card, the software itself you're going to be using for the encoding
can be complex, could be buggy, could be expensive.
Could be a sudden blue
could be all of
death.
those. It could be all of those. So yeah, exactly. Dedicated hardware devices. We're playing with the Pearl-2 here today, but this includes the Pearl Mini in this regard, and many other hardware encoders out there on the market, not only ours. But the advantage of them is typically they are not running a desktop operating system like Windows or Mac OS. They are dedicated, built to task, meaning they are optimized for this one task. That's all they do. You don't have to worry about automatic updates taking it down in the middle of your stream. And that's a joke we repeat on this show a lot, but it legitimately happens. We hear from customers every day who are in the middle of a live event using their laptop with Wirecast, and something happens and the system reboots in the middle of their event. That's a disaster. That if you're trying to run it as a professional, that loses your credibility. So making sure that you have the right equipment and reliable equipment is very important. So you don't have to worry about that stuff with a hardware encoder.
And another benefit to having a hardware encoder that is dedicated for live streaming, for encoding, for recording, is you may have the option to do the recording and streaming of multiple sources and external sources, whereas with a computer, you're limited to whatever your hardware might be.
Right,
If
exactly.
you've got a USB capture card, you've got one video source as an input, maybe a USB microphone.
Yeah, and I mean, running software encoding occupies a lot of system resources. If you have that Walmart special $300 laptop, sorry, it's probably not going to go so well.
If you're trying to use a Chromebook,
yeah, you might be able to do it in the browser-ish.
it's true.
So, you know, when you start to add up the cost of, many people are going to be using higher-end laptops with i5, i7 class CPUs, things like that. You're talking about laptops that are $1,500 to $2,000 for a Windows PC, and $2,500 to $3,000 to plus for a MacBook. That's no small potatoes. And you can get a lot of hardware encoders in that same kind of price range. So let's dive into the hardware encoding stuff. Let's dive into what are the first steps when we want to go live on YouTube.
Well, the first thing you're really going to want to do is make sure that your YouTube account is enabled for live streaming.
How do we know?
Well, one of the ways we can do that is if we can just switch over to my laptop over here. In the top right-hand corner, you have obviously the options to sign into your YouTube account. And one of the things you can do is go to your features page. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and go to youtube.com/features.
Yeah, one of the funny things is there's a bunch of pages for account management on YouTube that are not easy to actually click through in their menus. The features page is one of them. Luckily, it's just youtube.com/features. The information you get here is very valuable because there's copyright status, community guideline status. So if you're getting strikes for things, they'll show up here. And it's also where you can ask for special access to specific features. Some of them are obviously limited by your account. For example, this account is too small and has nothing, so it can't monetize anything. If you're a bigger account, you can monetize. But here, we've already done it, but there are settings here for enabling live streaming.
Yes. So live streaming would be this guy here. It is disabled by default, so you're going to want to go in there and make sure that you enable that. Now, this is not an immediate approval. This is a 24-hour process.
Yes, it takes 24 hours after you click the enable for it to activate. I have seen it be less. It actually seems to be random. I think they say it's up to 24 hours, but they don't say up to, they just say 24. So I've seen people get it in an hour, 4 hours, 6 hours kind of thing. But 24 is what I would expect. What that means is you can't just log into that page on YouTube, click the enable button, and immediately start live streaming on YouTube. You have to wait until it actually enables, and there is that time delay. One of the other ones on that page right next to it that we might as well mention now, because we are going to mention this later, because it's one of the big strengths of YouTube. It's the one right next to it.
You're talking about the embed live stream.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we have a lot of people that often ask, especially with some of our other products, like even our Webcaster X2 users, is how do I embed my live stream on a weekly basis or on a monthly basis so that I don't have to always link back or go back to the page and try to throw that back up onto my website at a later date?
Yeah. The nice part is that one of the advantages a lot of paid CDNs have is the ability for you to embed the stream on your own personal website.
Right.
Company's website, church's website, whatever it might be. YouTube can do that as well, and it's one of the few, Facebook can't.
Nope.
Twitch can't really, sort of can, but not very effectively. YouTube, that's a built-in feature, but it is separately enabled. Once that's enabled, then you get that advantage of being able to embed it onto your own website. And that makes YouTube a great choice for people just starting out in live streaming who don't want to go into a paid service provider yet.
Right.
So there are other advantages to paid services like Vimeo.
Well, of course, but you're also paying a premium price for that too.
Yeah, but $200 a month is no small ask. So if you're not quite there yet, this can be a part step.
Right. So once you've enabled that account, within that next 24 hours or so, feel free to go back to that features page and just double check to see if embedded live streaming is enabled. And if it's not, enable it. You may never use it, but it's a nice to have.
Danny was just saying, where are we again within YouTube? It's youtube.com/features. When you're logged in, it'll show you that page. Now that we have that enabled, we did it ahead of time, of course.
Yep.
Now that we have it enabled, you can stream in the browser. You can stream from a hardware encoder. You can stream from a software encoder. So, again, as we mentioned, for mobile, you need that 1,000 subscribers, though.
Yes.
So, if you don't even bother trying. So the next one, hardware encoders. What do we mean by that? We've kind of talked about it a little bit, but maybe give us a little bit of a picture of what that looks like in terms of what are, well, I guess we've mentioned some of the advantages already.
We have.
Let's look at, that's a tough one because we've mentioned it already.
Well, we can talk about some appliances or some adjacent appliances that really kind of do what a hardware encoder does, but again, the dedicated device, especially if we're talking about Pearl-2 in this case, since that's what we're streaming with today, can capture those multiple video inputs so that you can create those multiple layouts, do that live switching to be more dynamic for your audience, as well as capturing that analog audio if it's not coming directly from HDMI or SDI or a USB-based microphone.
Absolutely. That's definitely, for me, one of the advantages I see when you start looking at the professional level encoders, like the Pearl family of encoders. I'm not going to be shamed into not mentioning it, but you're talking about multiple video inputs, multiple professional level audio inputs, trying to do the same thing on a computer-based and software encoder means one heck of a machine, if it's even possible. The Pearl-2 can support up to 6 HD inputs. If you can get that working on any laptop successfully and well with using capture cards, I would love to see it, but I don't think you can.
Now, the other advantage to having a hardware encoder as well is most of them can stream to multiple destinations simultaneously.
Exactly.
Something you won't see as much with software encoding unless you're using a restreaming service.
There are some that do, but again, you're talking about a very high load on a piece of equipment that's just not designed for it.
Yeah.
Hardware encoders typically are designed for it. So they're designed for those multiple professional inputs, audio and video. They're designed for simultaneous multiple encoded outputs in many cases, like the Pearls are. And also, just as someone mentioned in chat, they can be lighter on your computer. Well, in that case, there's 0 on your computer. Something like a Webcaster or a Pearl Mini or Pearl-2 does nothing on your actual computer in terms of load.
Yes.
The encoder is doing all of the work. So that means you don't have to, you could literally manage a hardware encoder like a Pearl with your smartphone, and that's all. You don't need anything else. You could use the Chromebook or a tablet. It doesn't matter because you're not using that system for any of the actual work. And that can be a big advantage.
Right. Now, one thing, of course, is hardware encoders can sometimes be a little daunting, but after a quick read of usually a pretty simple or straightforward user guide, it's probably the better solution to go.
Or watching this video back 1,000 times.
Or, you know, depending if it's not one of our products, certainly any YouTube channel or any, just doing a quick YouTube search, you're going to find a lot of tutorials on how to get this done.
So, first step, let's step through this here. Let's have you show us what the first step to create a live stream on YouTube looks like.
Right. So you've enabled your YouTube live streaming capabilities. Today what we're going to do is go over more the YouTube live beta, I guess, approach of being able to do live streaming.
We had a long argument in planning this episode because both Matt and myself personally are not big fans of the current YouTube beta, studio beta. I always immediately switch over to Classic. We're not going to be covering Classic today. We're going to cover the beta. So proceed, sir.
So there are a couple of ways of getting to this, but today we're going to show you the quickest and simplest way to get to that, and that's just by going up here to this little camera with the plus icon. So you can go create a video or a post. So in this case, we're going to go live. Now, if you're obviously using a laptop, it's going to ask you typically to prompt for the first time to allow you for your microphone and webcam to be used as a source.
In this case, we're not using that.
Nope. So we're going to end up going to this little stream icon here at the top. At this point, you can create your title whatever you want it to be. We're going to go stream to YouTorbs. And we're going to make this one public so that everyone can watch it if they really want to. And then
we're not going to tell you where it is, though.
No. So we're going to say that this is fun. And then you can either do it so that you're streaming right now, or you can schedule it at a later date. So if I was to just click on that.
YouTube has two types, Stream Now and an event. Stream Now, I mean, there's some layers to it, but generally it's something that's just almost permanently in your channel, and you just kind of populate when you feel like it. Whereas scheduled, you can set a date, time, just like we do for this show. You can advertise it ahead of time, you can promote it, and things like that. So we're going to do the Stream Now for now, though.
So we're going to go ahead and create the stream. So once the stream has been created, you're going to get this beautiful little window, and it's going to ask you for a little bit of information.
So this is the first time we've done it on this account, so this pop-up immediately appears. Once you've done this a couple of times, this pop-up doesn't appear, but that information is very important, and is still visible, just they don't pop up with that reminder.
Yeah, it's just down here in the bottom left-hand corner. Yeah. So one of the things we can just look at just from the beginning here, if we go up into the top right-hand corner, you'll notice a gear icon. Now, if you've enabled live streaming, but you haven't done things like allowing embedding of live streaming, you'll notice that there's an option right here in the top to enable that. Now, if you're going to enable the embedding option for live streaming so that you can put this onto your specific website, ensure that you do this before you start going live.
Yeah,
if
you can't go back.
Yeah, if you go live and then try to enable this feature, it won't become available until the next time you stream, anyways. It's also a great place to be able to enable live chat or disable it if you really don't want commentary from anybody else.
There are instances where you might want to disable live chat. I used this example earlier. You know, our national broadcaster, CBC News, was broadcasting the election results on Monday. On YouTube, they had their live chat turned off for obvious reasons. Don't feed the trolls.
Yes. Now, in order to be able to stream, you obviously have to take some credentials. So as with a hardware encoder and with most software applications, they do require a stream URL and a stream key. So in this case, you're going to find all that information down here. So we have a stream URL and a stream key is available. One of the benefits, of course, to having this YouTube beta is you have the ability to copy this stream key without having to reveal that information.
Why wouldn't I want to reveal it?
Let's see. In our case, since we're live streaming this content already, if I was to reveal this information, someone could easily capture that information ahead of me before I can paste those credentials and stream whatever they want to my channel without my knowledge.
And YouTube will also take the second connection to override the first.
Correct.
So not revealing your stream key is very important for security. The URL for YouTube, that part where it has a.youtube.com, /live2, never changes.
No.
That ingestion server is basically always the same. The stream key is your unique identifier for that instance. If you were to leak that, someone could hijack your stream. So never reveal that publicly. Ideally, never share it with anyone either, which is why it's hidden by default and there's a separate button to reveal it. And as Matt said, the copy button now works in beta, whereas before you had to reveal it to copy it.
Absolutely.
Weird, but anyway.
Now, some of the other things you might want to do before you start setting up that stream completely is obviously having access to that embed stream, being able to upload your own custom thumbnail so that you'll have an image ahead of time, especially if you're scheduling an event, I should say.
Yeah, thumbnails can be very important. They're one of those general rules of thumb for YouTube in general, whether it's VOD or live. People want to see something that makes sense or clickbaity or whatever in the thumbnail.
We're looking at you, BuzzFeed.
If you don't upload a custom thumbnail, YouTube will grab a random frame from the video and use that as the thumbnail. The problem with that is it may not be a very
flattering?
Yeah, it might not be very flattering.
I'll be honest, I've got a couple of YouTube videos out there on my test accounts where the image is just me doing this.
Yeah, it's just, so you don't want that. You don't want that. So you probably, especially if you're doing this for professional reasons, you probably want to upload a custom thumbnail, which, again, a little bit of time in your favorite graphic application, you can create a simple JPEG and upload that, and it'll be great. So,
can we talk about just embedding options for a second?
Sure, absolutely.
So we know that you can embed a specific stream on your website, right? But as far as that embed code goes that you can retrieve for this stream, that's a one-time use.
Yes.
What would be the other option to do that?
So the other option is you can embed essentially your channel ID. So you'd use a similar embed code to what YouTube will give you for a single event in terms of the code you have to put into your website. But instead of using the video ID, which is a random string of stuff, you would use your channel ID. And you can find out where your channel ID is by going to youtube.com/advanced_. Yeah, now I'm losing it.
Something.
Anyway,
now, it's important to note that you can easily search this online.
Yes.
You know, how to find YouTube channel ID.
Exactly.
It's pretty straightforward. There's also a great help section that will become important, especially when we start talking about encoding
so I apologize
settings.
that slipped my mind at the moment, but people are mentioning it in chat, you know, how do you get to these pages in YouTube without knowing those URLs? Honestly, the only times I've ever found it trying to click through the menus has been by accident because they're not easily accessible. Part of it's buried in your Google account, part of it's buried in your YouTube account. While they are the same, they are also not. So they're kind of scattered all over the place.
Now, if you do a Google search, it will be pretty straightforward to find.
Exactly. Google it.
Google it. Best way to go.
So, but yes, you can embed your channel ID so that any stream now, not any event, but any stream now that you create on your YouTube channel would embed. So that's one way to basically have a persistent embed, is to do it that way. But again, it won't work for events.
No.
So it would have to be a stream now only workflow.
Yeah, as an on-the-fly social media style streamer, it's your best option.
Again, if you're embedding to your own website, the best example of this is many churches will do that. They know when, the audience knows when to show up, Sunday at whatever time, and they know the website, so you don't have to do a scheduled event for that type of stream.
Yep.
You can just use a stream now because the audience already knows when and where to consume. So, all right, so.
Why don't we talk about how to set up a stream?
Yes.
So what we'll do is we'll start with setting up a stream, and then we're going to look at the encoding settings, which are equally important for any stream.
So we played with this stuff. What other information is in here that's valuable?
Now, enabling DVR is obviously an excellent way to go. This allows you to obviously play back that content at a later date.
Right, so that converts to VOD.
To VOD. Without that, essentially, the minute that your stream ends, it's gone forever.
Right. That's on by default, luckily, but that is something. The next one I find interesting, and we played with this episodes ago.
Yep.
If you want to do a 360 stream, you can. There's a number of ways to do that. Again, sometimes that's a hardware encoder, sometimes it's a software encoder, depending on the equipment you have.
Yep.
But if you want to stream in 360, you have to tell YouTube ahead of time that it's 360. Otherwise, it's just going to see that weird stretched image. And if for more information on 360, we have other things talking about that. But 360 as a video signal, like over HDMI, is not 360. It's just stretched really, really big. To reinterpret that for YouTube to know it's 360, you have to set that flag, and then it knows to curve it.
Correct. Now, another option is adding delay or latency.
Yeah, so this is something where, well, I think everyone's probably pretty aware that broadcast television uses delays so that they can do on-the-fly editing. Someone swears, or there's nudity, or whatever. They have time to cut it out before it actually makes it to live. This doesn't quite do that, but it does give you some opportunity so that things are not instantly live all the time. And that can help. Sometimes you want delay. Sometimes, if you're a game streamer, for example, you don't want someone stream sniping you.
Right.
So you would set a longer delay to make sure that there's enough offset.
Finally, there's also like an automatic closed caption. Now, in terms of Google and YouTube's algorithm, it's pretty good, but it's not perfect.
No, the best way to use this is when you turn it on, it'll actually give you a URL to post the actual closed caption data. So there are services out there that can create the captions for you, and whether that's automatic or whether that's a person typing them, and then their software that publishes closed captioning information, it's a little different from video streaming, but it's data streaming, would use this URL to send the caption data to YouTube, and it would ingest that and display that.
Now, as a paid service, it is very affordable.
Generally,
I believe it's about 90 cents per minute, I believe, of content. So
down the road, this will 100% be done by AI, though.
Oh, absolutely.
The other piece here would be latency.
Yeah, so the latency, which is just...
If you scroll down a little bit there's three different types of latency on YouTube. Normal is the default, of course, low and ultra low. Obviously, if you are intentionally trying to have no latency, you wouldn't set a delay, and you might use low or ultra low latency. The downside to the low and ultra low latency is there is a higher risk of not being able to recover gracefully from missing data. So if you are, let's say, a live stream person running off of a mobile internet connection, if you go into a weak signal area or something like that, temporary dips in bandwidth are not going to be as graceful with ultra low latency as with normal latency, where there's more buffering involved.
Right.
So again, it's a matter of what is your choice. If you're going for really rapid interaction from your viewers, and you're very confident in your connection, low and ultra low latency can give you some advantages.
Now, we've got a couple of other tabs here. One section here is for analytics. Now, this is information that you would typically get after your stream has ended. You can also get some of that information while the stream is live, but...
Yeah, it'll show your active connected viewers and so on.
And then the average time that people, until they got bored.
Yeah.
When did they leave?
Yes.
And the last but not least is obviously the stream health section.
This is an important troubleshooting one. When we start sending data from this Pearl to this stream we're setting up, it's going to tell us some information here. It's broken it down to be very basic, but there's a log, which right now there's only one entry saying there's no data, dude. But this is going to tell us if it's good, it's green. If it's yellow, it's giving us a warning about something, and this log will tell us what it is. If it's red, it means it's bad, and it'll say bad. That usually means you're not getting enough data, which can indicate bandwidth issues,
firewall that's throttling.
There could be any number of things. So this is a great troubleshooting step when you're going, hey, I don't understand, why am I getting all this weird buffering on my YouTube live stream? Check your stream health. If it says bad or warning, that's why. There's not enough data coming in. So this can be a great troubleshooting step.
Now, I always recommend patience when you're setting up anything for YouTube. I find that first 10 seconds or so that the data is being received, it's going to say that it's bad no matter what.
It starts to get packets, but not full packets yet, and that's pretty. It didn't used to be the case. They've changed something on YouTube, so they'll probably fix it.
One day.
Maybe.
So why don't we set up a stream?
Sure.
So going back to the stream settings section, we've got our stream URL and stream key. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that stream URL, and we're going to go ahead and jump into our Pearl-2 web user interface.
So when we're looking at our encoder, obviously there's a lot of different things here. And the first place we want to start is our encoding settings. YouTube has a whole big chart on what their recommended encoding settings are at various resolutions, like 1080, 720, 4K, and so on. We need to look at that and take several things into consideration.
Yep.
One being bandwidth, and we've covered this on previous shows, but basically whatever bit rate you want to use, you need to be able to do 1.5 or times 2 of that bit rate as stable upload bandwidth to really be successful at that. So for 1080p, which is what we're going to attempt today,
yep.
YouTube recommends somewhere between 3 and, or is it 4 and 9 megabit?
About that, typically.
Usually 5, 6 is the target that you're really aiming for to have decent quality at 1080p at 30 frames per second.
Now, this doesn't mean that you have to abide by those rules. There's a little bit of room for flex, but it's just what's recommended in order to have good quality.
Exactly. So the first thing we need to do is set our resolution. So on Pearl, there's a way of doing an automatic one, but if you're doing any mixing and switching, you want to turn that off and have a fixed one.
Right, so we're going to go ahead and use a fixed one.
So we're going to use 1080 as our fixed one. YouTube also recommends a keyframe interval of 2 seconds.
So we're going to go ahead and set that. Quick
cliff notes on keyframes, that's how often you're sending a full, complete frame as opposed to a partially interpolated frame.
As a reference.
So, yes.
Limit frame rates, I guess today we're going to be doing 30.
We'll do 30.
We don't have anything else like that.
And then our usual default, we like to use 5 megabit as a good medium.
It's a great place to start. Now, YouTube is also very particular about its audio encoding settings as well. So where it might default to AAC 48, we know that YouTube loves AAC 44 kilohertz, and it likes having an audio bitrate of 128 kbps.
Yes. Now there is some flex in some of these settings. These are the common ones. Other platforms will have different settings, so it's important to know what platform you're using and what its preferred options are. And of course, the information out there, it's easy to find. So that's there. We've set up our Pearl. We saved those settings. Now what's next?
Next step, let's create our stream. So in the channel streaming page, we go to stream to server, which will be streaming to our content delivery network. We're going to click on RTMP push because we want to create a stream to YouTube. You can rename this if you so choose. I'm going to call it UT or YT for YouTube. And then I'm going to go ahead and paste.
And then we're going to ask our producer, Michael, today to move to our super secret layout because we're going to copy the stream key and we're not going to let all of you know what it is.
Because we want to maintain that privacy.
So let's hit apply on that. You guys can't see our stream key. This is important that for Pearl users, Pearl stores the stream key in plain text. It does not star it out the way the YouTube interface does.
Right.
So we've created our own layout for this stream to block out that chunk of data so you guys can't see it. But again, it's important to make sure this is information that you don't generally share with people so they don't hijack your stream.
Now, the other thing you will have noticed is I didn't put anything for the username or password. Most content delivery networks like YouTube or streaming to Facebook or to Twitch do not require or even want you to really put in a username or password. So I'd say 80 to 90% of the content delivery networks that you're going to use for this is going to be without a username and password.
Most of the basic ones don't. Our partner StreamShark is one of the few that I know absolutely do require a username and password. Like you said, most, especially the social media ones, they do not at all. And this is important because it means that if a client wants you to stream on their behalf, you don't have to know. They just need to send you the URL and stream key. You don't have to know their details. All you need is primarily that stream key.
Right.
So let's collapse that and let Michael switch away from that layout so that our super secret stuff is hidden.
Perfect.
Now what?
The next thing that we can do is hit start. Now, contrary to what you might think, this will start pushing the information to YouTube, but it won't automatically start the stream.
Okay, so what does that look like?
So if I was to press start, there should be a count up timer. Should happen in a second or two.
Okay, so
there
it
we go.
goes. So now when we go over to YouTube, what do we see?
Probably nothing yet. Now, keep in mind that when you're pushing data to any content delivery network, there's going to be a little bit of latency or delay between the time that you start saying or doing something and the time that you see it anywhere.
Absolutely.
So as an example, everything that I'm saying right now has already happened about 30 seconds ago.
But I can see already right away that even before our video preview populated there, YouTube started reporting that there was an excellent connection. because the stream health kicked in automatically and said, yep, everything's running great. We're getting the data we're expecting. You're perfect.
Now, we're going to click on Stream Health just so you can take a look to see what you would typically see on YouTube in the dashboard.
So again, you can see the log updated there and says everything's healthy. It's giving us a green excellent indicator. So we know that we are not running into any bandwidth issues streaming at 5 megabit from this.
And current viewer base is 0.
No one knows this channel exists.
Correct.
and then finally,
when you're all set to go, in the top right-hand corner,
it's the Go Live button. So that's what you were mentioning earlier. Although Pearl was sending data to YouTube, it was not, in fact, live on YouTube yet. You can preview it. You can maybe make some last-minute adjustments. It doesn't actually go live on your channel until you hit that Go Live button. One of the things that we've found is that even though you might create a scheduled event, as we referred to earlier, for a specific date and time, even at that specific time, YouTube won't automatically go live. You still have to click the Go Live button. Facebook automatically triggers and goes live.
Right.
So again, getting used to which platform you're using is important. And YouTube has that thing where it doesn't automatically start really hardly ever.
By default.
By default.
There is a setting buried now. I haven't found it in YouTube Live Beta yet, but on the classic side, that does allow you to enable and disable this feature.
Yes.
If you disable this feature, when you hit Start on Pearl, it will automatically start streaming live to YouTube.
This button, Sync to Preview, when you have that checked, as soon as you start the preview, which you can start whenever, you're immediately live, no matter what. So
which we don't recommend in general in case there's any other things that you need to troubleshoot for whatever reason.
Exactly. So those are some of the basics. Somewhere we lost our signal. I think our NDI signal from one Pearl to another is giving us a bit of flakiness there. So don't worry about that. We'll blame Cameron since he's not here. Guy who's not here to defend himself gets the blame.
Yes.
I'm going to look at chat here because I saw a bunch of people had a bunch of questions. But those are some of the basics, guys. So please throw your questions into chat and we will try to address those. Someone was asking, looking for the best hardware software to go live, what's your best option, and a budget of $1,500. Does that include only the encoding option, or is that cameras, audio, everything? If you're only talking about encoding, you can buy multiple Webcaster X2s for $1,500. You could also buy a $1,000 laptop and a decent capture card within that budget. And that would work okay. You're not going to do anything super crazy. You're not going to do 4K, but you can do some reasonable stuff on a laptop with a $1,000 laptop and a decent capture card.
Now, if you've already got a good or decent laptop and you're just referring to hardware that you can use along with software, and you've got a $1,500 budget,
yeah,
you've got quite a few options. If you want to just have a single input to a computer using something like a USB capture card, you can use a video mixer. One of my favorite ones I like.
V1.
One of my favorites right now.
Send that out to an AVIO 4K and
stream that content using a maybe free streaming software.
Paid encoding software like Wirecast and vMix are great. They're extremely powerful. They offer a lot of great options. They are not cheap.
Nope.
They can range from $400 to $1,000 for the license for those pieces of software. It's one of the reasons why OBS is so popular, is that it's free. The downside is that it's open source. There is no support to call. There is no help. You're on your own with an open source piece, other than asking the community, and who knows when they'll get back to you.
Right. Now, if you guys are curious to know a little bit more about streaming software, we did cover this in an earlier show, probably a couple of months ago now.
Yeah.
Definitely worth checking out.
Exactly.
Thank you, NDI source, for failing us again.
Tim was just mentioning here, not to contradict, but I think it's possible to restrict Windows updates to a specific time. Yes, it technically is. However, some Windows updates that Microsoft deems are critical, it will attempt to do anyways and will pop up and ask you if you want to snooze it. If the operator makes a mistake and goes, I don't know what button to push, and pushes the wrong one,
or pushes nothing long enough.
Right, there still is risk. Of course, there's always the risk of something crashing on the system as well. So that's never a good thing, especially if you're trying to multitask on one machine.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so, and Tim was just saying he did a YouTube video demonstrating the X2 on his channel. Yeah, thanks for that, Tim. It was very good. Tim also mentioned, YouTube Classic makes it much easier to delete test streams, harder to find within beta. Personally, I think everything in Classic is better.
Well, we also have to consider that we're talking about YouTube beta.
Yeah.
Beta literally still means
So-
it's in testing. It's not perfect. It's not a finalized version.
Exactly. Danny was also saying we were too fast in the audio settings. Again, this is information that's out there. If you look at what YouTube recommends, it's very easy to find. But AAC 44 kilohertz at 128 kilobyte per second is what YouTube prefers. Again, if you Google YouTube encoding settings, it'll be right there. But that is generally what YouTube prefers and recommends. You can use MP3 as well, but they normally, actually, yeah, Michael, if you bring up the laptop share here, this is on the
YouTube
support
help page.
YouTube help page. This is a chart. This is their chart. Any setting, bitrate, resolution, all of that. Audio never changes.
Nope.
You know, this is what they recommend. So if you look at things like,
Let's talk about 1080p. We were just looking at this before.
well, let's scare some people and look at 4K 60.
4K 60, perfect.
So 4K 60 expects a bit rate of 20 to 50 megabit. So let's go back and do our math of 1.5 or ideally times 2 on that. That's how much upload bandwidth you need to successfully do 4K 60, which is why no one does it.
So if you're on the low end and you want to do 20 megabit per second, you need probably realistically about 40 megabits
40.
per second of dedicated upload speed to get this done.
Yeah, so money.
Thanks, Mike.
Let's see. Tim was also saying a good practice here is don't use tiny text on a thumbnail. It's hard to read on phones. That's an excellent point, Tim. The vast majority of live video consumers are using a mobile device. It's something like 75% or 80%. So you want to make sure that you're tailoring your content a little bit to them. It's another reason why no one's bothering to stream in 4K, because when someone's watching it on a phone, totally irrelevant. But great point in the thumbnail. If the thumbnail or any text you're putting out there is too small and you think it's important to your content, let's say you're showing PowerPoint slides and the text is 8 points, no one's going to be able to read it. So make sure that things are visible.
Now, as a mobile streamer, if you're using your cell phone for streaming purposes, it may not feel natural, but I would recommend try to keep your phone as stable as possible.
Tripod.
And also, if you can, if you're going to be on the move, try to remember a landscape camera shot. So turning your phone sideways so it's a proper 16 by 9
Unless you're on RPAN, they only do portraits.
Unless you're
yeah, so Danny was mentioning some other platforms like Mimo Live and stuff like that that are fairly low cost. Yeah, outside of obviously the social media platforms, YouTube and Facebook and Twitch, things like that, there is a huge range of live streaming platforms that are available on the market. Obviously, Vimeo Live is very popular for higher end professionals, as they were for VOD video content. Their live streaming platform is very similar, but it probably represents the top end of the market. There's other ones as well. You know, our partners, StreamShark is a great one geared towards enterprise customers. You know, again, the big companies that are doing their own thing, but they don't necessarily want to try and host it on their own physical infrastructure because money. So there's a lot of things there. And then Tim was also making another great point here. YouTube will also warn you if there's low or no sound if you're paying attention. Again, yeah, that stream health, the log is going to give you a ton of information if you look at it, but you need to go look at it. We always make sure that before we go live for you guys, we launch the preview, as you saw, before we hit that go live button. We open up the audio preview in the stream just to make sure that it's a fair representation of what we're getting out of our board. And I saw in the middle of this stream, some of our coworkers were running back and forth, making adjustments to make sure that it was, because as we went through, we have a little bit of fan noise from the Pearl-2 and some things like that. So balancing that out for noises we don't normally have in this room was a little different today. So on the fly adjustments.
And if I was very quiet at the beginning, guys, I am very sorry. There's only so much the audio guy can do from in front of the camera.
Exactly. I'm going to go back up higher here because Linda had a question about what about bringing your smartphone signal into a browser. You can't. It's not the way cameras on a smartphone work. The camera only goes into the phone, and the phone doesn't mount that any other way. The only way you could theoretically do that is to connect an HDMI output from the phone, if it supports it, into a capture card, into a computer, and then open the camera app. But you're not going to hide the on-screen display of the camera app from the phone. Not all phones will even allow you to do such a thing. And at the end of the day, you'd be better off connecting a real camera into a capture card, into a computer, so that you're getting a way better image quality than what a smartphone can give you anyways. So yeah, it's, yeah.
Although to be fair, very on brand. Next week we are going to be showing you how to get a guest for connecting a phone basically to
so
your
we're going to
live
be playing around with some stuff next week on how to bring in phone guests. Danny was mentioning Mimo Live supports NDI out of an iPhone. Yeah, and NDI does potentially offer some interesting stuff. I've played around with NDI out of my Galaxy S8, and the performance was terrible. The mobile side of support for NDI, getting that over the network, especially because you're relying on Wi-Fi for very high bandwidth, it's not great. So it's theoretically interesting, Danny, I agree. My experience using it has not been good. It has been pretty bad. First of all, the NewTek app to use NDI is $30.
Well, I'm out of here.
The most expensive app in the App Store. For what? If you use, on Android, you can use OBS for Android.
That's true, you can.
Use NDI. The performance is awful and it's super buggy. So I couldn't ever recommend that either.
Now, OBS is obviously open source, so it's not like they have a dedicated team to work on these.
I personally found the super expensive NewTek one was also not good on an iPad. So personal opinions. At the end of the day, if you have the option, a good old SDI signal can't be beat.
And you can run a heck of a lot further than HDMI or any other source.
Yeah, yeah. Linda was mentioning, try convincing stubborn teenagers addicted to their phones to use a real camera. Hey, listen, if the kids can't learn, it's not my fault. If they don't understand the difference in quality, what are you going to do?
Laugh, mostly.
Yeah, give up. I don't know. So anyway, throw any more questions you guys have about YouTube in the chat. Like I said, we probably will be doing more episodes like this in the future, covering other platforms like Facebook. Might even need to do a Mixer one.
I actually really want to do that.
I haven't touched Mixer in a long time. Yeah, so Danny was saying you use NDI routinely with no problems with the Boinks app. Yeah, that one's a bit different with their photo presenter. It's a little different with images as opposed to live video. So yeah, that could definitely play out a little different for that. The big advantage of NDI, I think we've covered on some other shows, is that it's not strictly one thing or another thing. NDI can be your titling, NDI can be images, NDI can be video. So from that perspective, it's a protocol that's very cool and has great potential. We'll see if it improves in the future so that you could use maybe a room filled of mobile devices all streaming NDI to a centralized encoder.
With no cables.
That would be cool. That would be cool. Alrighty, so I think that'll wrap it up today. Again, please throw any questions into chat last minute while we do our wrap up. As Matt mentioned,
next week's show. First of all, it's Halloween.
It's Halloween next week.
Are you dressing up?
I don't know. I'm not really a Halloween guy, to be honest. I don't know.
Can you dress up as like a basic bee? Like
basic
come on with the black vest and the pumpkin spice latte and.
Ooh, I might be able to. I do have some vests.
There you go.
I can do a vest and a bow tie. We'll see what we can come up with.
Perfect.
Multiple bow ties. Good hits.
Well, don't wear them all at the same time.
Yeah.
So next week, of course, we were talking about how to connect a phone guest basically to your live stream. So we're going to use that using analog content such as our mixing board. We're going to talk about it a little bit with Pearl. We did have one last question coming in, coming from Ken on Facebook. And I'm sorry, Ken, I didn't have the Facebook chat open in front of me. I only had YouTube open. Asking if you choose 44 for the encoding, do you get audio creep as opposed to 48? Your encoder should be resampling. If your input is 48 and you're encoding at 44, your encoder should be resampling correctly. Yes.
Should.
Doesn't mean it always does, but typically it will.
Ideally, in a perfect world, everything should match all the way through to make sure you don't have that. So if you have the option of setting, let's say it's running through your camera, if to output 44 into your encoder and then out of your encoder at 44
Yep.
to a platform that's ingesting 44, that's always going to be your ideal scenario. And there are some platforms out there, Vimeo's one, that really doesn't specify because it'll take anything. That's where you might run a risk. I've never seen it on YouTube really, if you're kind of playing it by the norm.
Yep.
But it's a good point, Ken. So yeah, there's always something to look at. Alrighty, I think that's going to end it. One more thing from Tim here. I think 4K is wasted on streaming. Today,
At the moment it is.
Today I agree. But for everyone in the chat, the last TV you bought or the last TV you went and shopped for, I bet you it was 4K. So it's going to matter soon. All right. That's it.
Thank you so much for joining us this week.
I'm George.
I'm Matt.
I almost said that reversed.
That would have been really funny.